Leonora Carrington has become much more well-known since her death, unfortunately. Like many of the women of the surrealist group, her contributions have been restored and studied at greater length. Like her close friends, Remedios Varo and Leonora Fini, as well as Ethel Cahoon, Alice Raon, Katie Orna, and many more like the Caribbean artists, Suzanne and Aimé Césaire. It turns out that the surrealists were not just white men. The connection of the surrealists with the occult has been noticed, but only as fodder for their work. Art historians in general have shied away from the pervasive artistic interest in the occult throughout history until recent years. Fortunately, the discovery of Leonora Carrington's own tarot cards, major arcana, removes all doubt that her occult studies permeated every aspect of her work and life. As Terry Ark and Susan Aberth write in her Guide to the Tarot, not only are Carrington's cards a reflection of her intense philosophical engagement with the tarot and other occult disciplines, they also provide us with considerable insights into many aspects of her paintings. Throughout her written and visual output, Carrington incorporated all manner of radical gender reversals and futuristic feminist proposals that we now realize had their origin in or fullest expression within her tarot deck. So thus, her tarot was not for fortune-telling, but for intense meditation and insight, a ritual of uncovering. This intense focus on the power of ritual can be seen in many of her paintings, but also in her writings, including the alchemical novel The Stone Door, republished this year in the US, and the apocalyptic magical novel The Hearing Trumpet, as well as many of her darkly humorous short stories, especially perhaps the most anthologized one, The Debutante. Less well-known are her many plays, recently gathered by Fage éditions in France, but heretofore unknown to the wider public, although a number were performed in Mexico. They're all fascinating and almost all filled with Black, surreal humor, folklore, magic, and ritual. Today, I will focus on her play Judith, an Old Testament figure who has had something of a revival of her own in recent years. But first, let me step back a millennium or so. Heo dhartha yawera funda, mund bir dat the mar and theona, that heo ach da mesta tharfa, hildo das haest and demon, that he here with the haest and brogan, ja frida frimna waldend. Here that's father an rodrum, torta tida fremera, that heo at the trumani elefen, at ho them almichtigen. Je fregenik dat hull of fairness, wim hatten wirken jorna, and allem wonderum thrimlich, jirwan uppswesando. To them het se gumen abaldor, alle de ildesten theneste. Hier dat ofste miklum refendum bronwiegende, kommen to them riken theon affären, focus ras one. That was the ferthendogere that Judith hiena. Gloa on je thonk, idis alfshinu, erest je sotta. I'm hoping the incantatory power of Old English poetry is clear, if not, in fact, the words themselves. Though written down, most of the audience for this work would have heard it recited or read aloud. The fragmentary Old English poem of Judith begins with the heroine already in Holofernes' camp and ready to carry out her secret mission of, spoilers, decapitating the leader of the besieging army, both literally and figuratively. This is not to suggest that Leonora Carrington knew the poem when she wrote her play Judith, but to establish the idea that the Old Testament heroine Judith has a tradition in English that not only stretches back to the roots of the language, but portrays her as both supremely intelligent, glow on yathonk, and as an alluring, magical woman, Idis Alfshinu, literally woman elf shining. It is possible that Carrington knew the canticle from the 16th chapter of the book of Judith, perhaps even sang it in a hymn in one or more of the several convent schools from which she was ejected. She repeats the familiar image of women playing timbrels and cymbals when the goddess-worshiping women in the hearing trumpet work their magic. And the verse reminds us that while the beautiful and powerful widow attracted many, she did not choose to accept another man into her life, which will figure in our play. Of course, one of the other important avenues of inspiration may well have been the paintings from the Italian portion of Carrington's education. It seems quite likely that she would have been captivated by Caravaggio's depiction of the heroine. Here, Judith looks almost nonplussed by her act. The faithful servant, on the other hand, seems eager for the grim duty. Many of the paintings of the Old Testament adventure have a restrained air, as if the painter's own squeamishness gets transferred to Judith. Cranach's take is almost bloodless. While it's possible that she may have seen Artemisia Gentileschi's more fiery painting of the decapitation, it was probably at that time still being touted as a Caravaggio, though one imagines that Carrington might have seen through such a dodge. Gentileschi's heroine unflinchingly concentrates on the work to be done. Untroubled by the blood, grateful for the assistance of her companion in holding down the struggling despot. She is a much more active scene there. The third volume of Leonora Carrington's writings, published by Fage éditions in 2022, includes a number of plays available publicly for the first time, and D'un royaume noir, as translator Carla Segura Pantoja writes. Among the scripts is 1961's Judith, originally written in Spanish, but here in French, and dedicated to her friend, the actor-director Leonora Cardiff, with whom she worked on The Tempest in 1959, a play, as we know, full of magical transformations, rituals, and hybridity. And some of you may have seen these masks before. They've been on display in a few places now. This is a time when, as Susan Aberth notes, a theatrical ambiance enters into her painting as well, no doubt influenced by her work with Cardiff, as well as the better-known productions like Penelope, based on one of her own short stories, and staged with Alejandro Jodorowsky, better known as a filmmaker and tarotist, and Nathaniel Hawthorne's Rappaccini's Daughter, a production on which she collaborated with the Nobel Prize-winning poet Octavio Paz. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, these plays also deal with transformation and hybridity. In this play, Carrington mixes the apocryphal Old Testament story of Judith with Egyptian mythology, joining the long history of occultists borrowing from that pool. Then she adds a few surprises of her own. Unsurprisingly, she creates a new feminist mythology from the story that nonetheless retains the ancient heroine wise in thought and of elfin beauty, as immortalized in the Old English poem. These qualities hint that she is more than human. At heart, the element of hybridity is the key to a better future and a common obsession for the artist. The Old Testament heroine, for all of her exceptional abilities, nonetheless upholds both the immediate patriarchal system and the patriarchal religion, even if she uses her success in the endeavor to carve out a solo, independent space free from many of its restrictions, and we all know women like that, right? Carrington both reduces the scope of Judith's actions and increases its resonances, along with adding the element of hybridity, key to this transformation. As Ona Earlmans argues, the long human obsession regarding hybridity with other animals, beyond the cultural and political analyses of Bakhtin and Baba, is not just about beings or identities that are in some way mixed. It is also about the struggle to imagine and represent them, how to bring them forth. While Ullmann's focus is poetry, clearly surrealism offers the same chance to explore these combinations as positive innovations. This hybridity is about crossing over and reporting from the other side rather than overlap. While Ullmann's examples lead up to the Derridian notion that the human-animal distinction is at the root of the structures of language, form, and power, and that the hybridizing categories might be a form of creative resistance, Carrington goes further because she does not accept the essentializing difference that Ullmann's and his poets do. There is no gap for her. She is a female human animal, and not merely an observer who uses language and imagination to put herself in the place of an animal. She seeks true hybridity. This means not merely appropriating the characteristics of an animal under observation, but seeking a new existence as a new animal, joined with a partner, a fellow animal. The desire to achieve that magical hybridity is the current that powers the tension of the play. This comes primarily, and perhaps surprisingly for those who have not read the play, which is probably, I'm going to guess, most of you, in the form of a chair that is the transformed lover of Judith, Gibeon, who is also a bélier castré and will be transformed like a phoenix. He has the appearance of being dead, or at least non-living, at the opening of the drama, as Judith sings about the moonless night, a faceless bird, and a desire for her lover to return home once more, a lover who is quite emphatically not her dead husband. She plays a stringed instrument, and it's quite possible the ambiance of this scene was influenced by items in the British Museum taken from the tomb of Queen Pubabi. You can see here the lyre. There's also a lioness head chair finial and the goat inlay panel. And of course, Puabi's name has another father-related significance. Gibeon, as the chair, speaks to her father with warning, though it is mostly perceived as cracks and groans, which Issachar, her father, attributes to his old bones. Ezram, the suitor her father has approved, keeps returning and begging Judith to relent and marry him and become queen of his house. It's not a role that offers freedom, only labor. Judith hears the voice of Gibeon but cannot recognize it. Her vision is obscured. Literally, as the stage directions remind us that the tent should be filled with a thick smoke. She sings again at Issachar's prompting, a song that speaks of her longing and loss, subjects unlikely to please her father. Through his bleary drunkenness, he does not pay attention to the lyrics. At the beginning of the play, she sings again, as at the beginning of the play, she sings again of a faceless bird, a bearded eagle. And I can't help but think it, perhaps this appropriately named quebrantahuesos, which does indeed look remarkably like a phoenix. And though it's rare, it can be found in the north of Spain, where Carrington was incarcerated in a mental institution during the war. She sings that they once shared a star where right was left and left was right, where his blood filled her body and hers his. This mutual hybridity is the embodiment of the love she longs for, a permanent joining where there's no space between the lovers. They inhabit the same skin. Gibeon's groans fill the tent and wake her father. Apparently, Issachar is responsible for the entrapment of Gibeon as a chair, and unlike Judith, knows that the chair is the source of the strange voice that they hear from time to time. But he wants her to marry Ezram and bear many sons to carry on his lineage. Though she cannot see the mystery within their home, she senses it and yearns toward the missing lover and for a reunion that is more than just a lover's reunion. It's a transformation that will join them in a new hybrid form. Issachar threatens Gibeon with fire, little knowing that fire is one of the liberating forces. The other is the patriarch's death. Gibeon calls becoming fire an honorable change, one which will offer him the freedom of un lion rugissant, and that Issachar will be forgotten afterward, which is his greatest fear and the source of his cruelty to his daughter. Gibeon continues to taunt the patriarch to get the transformation underway, but Issachar is fearful, hiding it behind bluster. He can sense the truth of his fate. Gibeon says there are worms crawling through the wood of the chair, singing a dirge for his splinters. Issachar drowns the voice with more wine. After Issachar makes a plan for Ezram to return and rape Judith, Gibeon continues to try to reach her through the obscuring wood and smoke. The threat of fire is ever present, and like the groans of both Gibeon and Issachar, it would have filled the audience with a yearning for release. Gibeon invokes another hybrid creature, the griffin, in a metaphorical speech suggesting the path to transformation, in the hopes that Judith will understand even if she cannot quite hear it. The details are magic and sonorous. The clacking of the griffin's beak, the dropped feathers making a path to the spiraling tower, and the resonant image of the apple, but with an added conundrum. Turn around and your body is half apple, but which is left and which right, and who will be eating it? Judith attends words she can barely hear, and they begin to change her. When Ezram returns to assault her, calling her name, Judith answers in the language of demons that now she is legion and no longer fits into a single name. Issachar persuades Ezram to rape his daughter in service of maintaining his male bloodline and name. The violent act rebounds on them both. Even Ezram recognizes the patriarchy as tyranny, without which he would have been nameless and free. Issachar's last words are to order her to go with Ezram and bear children so his name won't be lost. It's the last straw for Judith. Unlike her Old Testament namesake, who beheads one patriarch only to uphold her own patriarchal system, Carrington's Judith strikes a blow to end a patriarchal line. She dresses as the dead queen of Ur for this scene, presumably for the ritual dance with the bloodied head. One thinks of all the dancers in Carrington's paintings to imagine the form of the choreography. The blood is an important part of the ritual, but movement is as well. Judith, no longer Judith, is ready to take her next form. After the dance, she places the head of her father on the chair and lights his hair to begin the conflagration that will free her lover. The rumbling of the earth increases as the fire breaks through the bounds of what was into what will be. Judith becomes all things, the goddess Gradiva, the darkness of the Nile, the smile of the Sphinx, the gold of honey, the breath of lions. Even the single bitter tear that Isis dropped on the bier of Osiris. Her transformation is echoed as Scorpio arises from the ashes of the chair that was Gibeon and the head of her father. He tells her that he is her horse, always a resonant image of freedom for Carrington, but also quickly moves to Nu, saying, "We are centaur, griffin, sphinx." They will join their fates, but also their flesh. Reminiscent of the werewolf offspring at the end of the hearing trumpet, Judith and Gibeon/Scorpio form une seule bête, plus jamais mutilée, so one single creature no longer mutilated. As one, they ride away in a direction against our times, to the accompaniment of jackal howls. And again, if you've read The Hearing Trumpet, you know of the werewolf howls at the end of that. As Judith declares, our time has arrived, the time of hybrid lovers, a time beyond patriarchal control. And I'm told there's a Leonora Carrington painting in the new National Gallery, which you could go and visit, and worth it just to see that one. I'm sure there's lots of other great art there too. So thank you.